of Chicago Innovation, and we are thrilled to have all of you here for our live and recorded, thank you Doyle for recording tonight too, live taping of our Turn the Page on Age kickoff. Now, Turn the Page on Age really stems from a partnership between the Village of Chicago and Chicago Innovation Foundation with support from RRF Foundation for Aging. So round of applause for our supporters and partners. And you know, Chicago Innovation's vision for many years has been to ensure that innovation is for everyone. Now, everyone includes people of all ages. So that is the theme for tonight's event. And you know, to help bring this theme to life, I want to kind of paint a picture for a moment. So imagine a world where everyone's abilities and skills are appreciated at face value. And everyone is valued and embraced. It doesn't matter if you're older or if you're younger. And no one is excluded from anything, professionally, personally, socially, based on their age. I know that sounds like a strange world, but that's the future state we're trying to get to, and that's what Turn the Page on Age is all about. So Turn the Page on Age, which really is kicking off tonight. You're going to be hearing a lot more about it throughout the year. There's going to be a Turn the Page on Age Awards happening in the fall. There's a series of events. The Village of Chicago will be doing some others. There's a multimedia advertising campaign. Perhaps you've seen some of our bus ads or heard Tom on the radio talking about this. Video storytelling series, and more. And again, we're so grateful for all of you being a part of this, this early part of this initiative. To tell you more about this, it is my pleasure. What about Darcy?
No, Tom
This is live improv. We're in theater, so this is live improv. And clearly, I'm not a good improviser. However, we're going to next turn it over to Darcy Yvonne, who is the fantastic CEO of the Village of Chicago.
Thank you, Luke. We're so excited for you to be able to join us this evening. This is kind of like a wait, don't tell me special taping. And we're going to use the tape of this panel discussion in lots of ways during the remainder of the year in terms of getting the word out about ageism, age bias, and what we can do about it. So your coming tonight is really important, and we thank you, and we're particularly excited about the panel as well. We hope that you walk away with three things tonight. One is to hear about age bias, to be inspired by individuals who are actually doing something about it, and why it's important. And secondly, we want you to figure out ways that you can get involved in learning from people to celebrate their strengths instead of looking at them as a numerical age, and say what are the unique strengths and how can we leverage these in a very inclusive society. And thirdly, what does age mean to you? Is it a number? Does it keep you back? Is it something that you can look at in terms of saying, I'm not going to let age define me? So you'll be thinking about some of these ideas tonight as well. We're very excited because Retirement Research Foundation, which is now called RRF Foundation for Aging, is supporting this initiative. They have given us 3 years of support for Ageless Innovators, and this program is actually an outgrowth of the program of Ageless Innovators because of all the information that we have learned about best practices for younger people and older people, and actually people of all ages working together in age-integrated work groups. So with all of that, I would like to introduce Serena from Retirement Research Foundation. Serena Worthington is a fabulous program officer and a good friend of the Village.
Thank you, Darcy. Hello to all of you. Ageism is the most widespread and socially accepted prejudice today, according to the World Health Organization. Ageism impacts all of our lives in silent, complex, and often deadly ways. It is bad for your happiness, your sense of purpose, your health, your business, and for our economic growth and prosperity. We often blame ourselves for getting older. We feel devalued, especially after retirement. This internalized ageism results from a bombardment of anti-aging messages in the workplace, at the doctor's office, in the community, from businesses promoting anti-aging products, and from every aspect of the media, from newscasts, blogs, social media, TV, radio, billboards, magazines, movies, and on and on and on. We grow up steeped in ageist culture. But we can do something about it. Increasing awareness that ageism is a social justice and civil rights issue that causes tremendous harm is the beginning. Changing our language about aging, putting older and younger people together, encouraging companies to provide flexible and inclusive work environments, restoring respect and purpose for retired workers, changing the narrative at the doctor's office. These are tangible action steps you can take to begin changing the culture of ageism in the United States. Let me give you a few examples. According to many research studies, age-diverse work teams drive innovation, promote best practices, and peer mentoring while improving the bottom line for companies. With 10,000 people a day turning 65, many of whom wish to remain in the workplace, these baby boomers will be key to responding to a tight labor market and helping the U.S. remain competitive in the global economy. We know that negative views of your health and aging can shorten your life by 7.5 years. And aging, according to Yale researcher Becca Levy. Notably, memory tests showed that a positive attitude about getting older allowed people to perform 30% better than those with negative beliefs. Experiments in the lab across cultures following participants over many years give similar results for dementia, hearing, and physical function. This evening, we will be exploring these ideas further with our esteemed panel and give you some tangible action items to help change the narrative on aging and dismantle ageism in our society. Now, to kick off tonight's panel discussion, let me introduce our wonderful moderator, Michael Puente. Michael Puente is an award-winning reporter at WBEZ Chicago, where he covers news and issues primarily in Northwest Indiana, Chicago's southeast side, and south suburbs. Michael's work has aired nationally on National Public Radio and internationally on the BBC. He's been recognized by the Illinois and Indiana Associated Press Broadcasters Association, Chicago Headline Club, and was awarded last year the prestigious Studs Strickle Award by Public Narrative. Michael also serves as the rotating host for Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices on WTTW. Michael.
I should know how to turn on a mic. I gotta let you know, as a radio reporter, all day I'm reading off of scripts. It may sound like I'm not, so my eyes, I might stumble a little bit here. So the radio, you don't hear me stumbling because we go back, edit it, it sounds perfect. In real life, you're gonna say, boy, this guy makes a lot of mistakes. Even Latino Voices in Chicago Tonight, we get to redo it, magic of television. So thank you for having me here, Village Chicago, Chicago Innovation. We're going to hopefully have we have a great panel here and have a lively discussion, and we'll get to it. So our first panelist is Kim Hunt. Kim is the Executive Director of Pride Action Tank and Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy Operations at the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. The Pride Action Tank is a multi-issue think tank and project incubator that co-develops solutions that address challenges facing LGBTQ plus communities. We have Mary O'Donnell. Mary is the president of the RRF Foundation for Aging, which works to improve the quality of life for older people. RRF is one of the few private foundations in the United States devoted exclusively to aging issues. And the organization's vision is that all older people will continue to be valued and respected as participants in and contributors to our communities. And last but certainly not least, we have Tom Kuzmarski, an internationally recognized expert in the innovation of new products and services. Tom is the president and founder of the global consulting firm Kuzmarski Innovation, co-founder of Chicago Innovation, academic director at the Kellogg School of Management. He was also awarded the Village Chicago's prestigious Trailblazer Award in 2021. We'll get to it. So, Kim, when you hear the term turn the page on age, what do you think about that?
Okay. First of all, let me say I'm a huge WBEZ fan, so it's great to be sitting next to you. And thank you to the organizers for having me here today. So So I'll be honest, I thought about two things with that phrase. The first is rather dismissive. Turn the page as in move on, not care, not look at the issue in front of you or the person in front of you. But the place that I choose to stay is much more loving and inclusive, which is about looking at Turn the Page as an invitation to adventure, a new way of being and thinking, and a continuation of life. So I'm going to sit with that second way of thinking about Turn the Page on age.
Fantastic. Mary, what do you think when you hear that term?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Similar to you, Kim, I would say that where I land with it is sparking new opportunity, next chapter, sort of that sort of adventure awaits is where sort of the optimistic side of me likes to land. I think that it does also spark in me some thoughts about reframing or shifting or kind of shifting the narrative. How are we talking and thinking about age as well? So a couple different things at the same time.
Yeah, I would. Tom, what do you think about that phrase?
For me, it really comes down to two key things. The first is turn the page on age for me means we need to move on and start eliminating ageism in our society, business and personal. Number two, it really, to me, says we need to have more intergenerational relationships and also stop being an age-segregated society. So if those two things could happen, then I think indeed we would be able to have turned the page on age.
Right. You know, it's funny that we're doing this topic. At least I'm helping moderate it because it just feels like yesterday I started my journalism career and I've been in it now for 30 years. I remember being the youngest reporter in a little newspaper in the south suburbs called the Daily Southtown or the Southtown Economist. That's where I got my start. And now I'm like the oldest reporter at WB's. I've been here for 16 years. So it's like, whoa, what happened? So Tom, as we get older, people get apprehensive, but should this be a time for sort of renewing, reinventing yourself?
Yeah, it absolutely should be a time to reinvent yourself. Michael, let me tell you what I get so excited about. I see with Chicago Innovation Innovators, now I see more than ever before older people that are starting new businesses, starting new companies, coming up with new services, with new products. That years ago probably would have been the much younger tech person that would have done that. So I see that happening, and I also see a mindset where all of us are living longer, and the key is, of course, to live a healthy older life. But I think one of the essential things that we need to do is start talking about older people differently. And that, I think, is so intrinsic and so important. And so I'll just tell you right now, just the two that drive me crazy is the silver tsunami and the silver foxes. Oh, you're a silver fox. It's like, what are we talking about? So I think changing the language is going to be a key part of that too.
Can I piggyback on that? Just
Absolutely.
because I think that changing is so well said, like just even more about silver tsunami, I think that denotes to me or makes me think of like this emerging tragedy and run away, like head for the hills, there's a silver tsunami, when we know that instead the shifting demographics that our country is seeing is a tremendous asset if we can turn the page on age and think about it in that way. We know that older people are vital members of our families and our communities, and what they give if we are able to unleash and create the social opportunities and supports that they might need can really be tremendous. But it does come down to how we think and how we talk. And that needs to shift and change. Just subtle little differences that can start to think more about us instead of them. All of us are aging. Those sorts of shifts can go a long way, and hopefully then ultimately trigger to some policy and programmatic changes that we need as well.
Okay, let me throw you a different question here. With the pandemic, obviously things were closed down, people had to work from home. Did that expose certain challenges, say, folks who are older had to face, or did it open new opportunities for them?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? It depends on what you were experiencing before, in large part. So, sometimes we talk about healthy aging and mindfulness, and as a person who tries to meditate every day, it doesn't always work out, but I'm really keyed into, positive thinking and really letting my attitude sort of lead. But I also want to recognize that for many folks, they are not in a position to think about mindfulness or healthy aging. This pandemic has really illustrated how broken our safety net is for many people. And, I think we put a lot of onus on an individual to be responsible for their own outcomes when those safety nets just aren't there. At the same time, for someone who fortunately does not have to worry so much about, where my money is going to come from for my rent, how I'm going to pay for food and that kind of thing, I feel like I have the luxury of thinking about, what's my day going to be, and feel like I'm in control of that. And I think the pandemic has done two things. One, illustrated how rough it is for many folks, but also it has created opportunities for other people. And I think it really just depends on where you started at the beginning of the pandemic.
I see. And Tom, we've heard so many stories on radio and TV about workforce issues, that companies just don't have enough employees, and it seems like, it almost seems like some sort of something we've never experienced in this country before, where people actually just don't want to work. At least that's the sentiment out there. Can that create an opportunity for older Americans?
I think it can, Michael, but I think companies need to make some fundamental changes first. One of them, which is I know controversial, but I would get rid of any forced age retiring. My goodness gracious! So I mean, I can rattle off companies right here in Chicago that have a forced retirement at age 62. Well, 62? Are you 62? Are you kidding me? Goodness gracious! So I mean, that's an example of one, right? But two, I think really encouraging age diverse teams within companies, so that in the same way that for years I've talked about the importance and the value of a diverse cross-functional team for innovation, a key component of that is young and old and different races and different types of people and different functional backgrounds. So that diversity is what enables innovation to be done better. And so forming age diverse teams. And then the last would be if companies would create, like we've done with Ageless Innovators, intergenerational mentoring programs, so that you've got older and younger adults that are both mentoring each other.
Mary, what do you tell people who are starting to get a little bit older? What are some of the main challenges that they face or they fear as they get older?
Well, I think for everybody it's different and unique. I think sometimes we tend to sort of cast all older people in one light, and we know that it's a very unique, diverse segment of our population, just like all ages are. So one person's experience is never going to be the same as somebody else. It's definitely a heterogeneous group. I think that just as Serena said in her opening remarks, I think that many people, just like myself, who are aging, have kind of internalized some ageist things as we've all grown up in our society, and so there are certain preconceptions that we have going into our own aging process that need to be called out. There is just remarkable research these days that talks about how if you yourself can shift your own view on aging and how you're viewing your aging process, that also will lead to a healthier, longer lifespan. So that, comes with me being comfortable with my gray hairs as they come in and embracing those, and it means me not sort of saying you look great for your age when I'm meaning to give somebody a compliment, because what does that really mean? That's a little backhanded. So those are some of the things in just my own personal sphere, but we know that it is true that older people as they age will need some different types of supports. And so in my role at RRF Foundation for Aging, one of the things that I have the privilege to be a part of is hearing these incredible solutions that grantee partners like Kim and others are coming up with that acknowledge some of the challenges that come with aging and then try to build solutions around that. So that might mean that there's different types of transportation or housing needs that need to be taken into effect. There might be different sorts of social connectedness to build on the intergenerational connections that Tom was happening about. So there are solutions, and there's a reality that we need to not be too sugar-coated in looking over. But I think it also starts with where we are as individuals.
And Kim, are there unique challenges that folks in the LGBT community face as they get older that maybe others don't?
Yeah, I will say that, first of all, the LGBTQ community encompasses every identity in society, and so that makes us microcosm of the larger society, so many of the issues that other older adults face, we face as well. But then when you look at disparities in terms of even looking at who we expect to take care of us as we grow older, many LGBTQ older adults do not have children, are estranged from their families of origin, may not have had a spouse, or may not even be comfortable being out. We know a significant number of LGBTQ older adults feel like they have to go back in the closet when they are considering long-term care facilities. So it can be really heartbreaking. At the same time, there is resilience there. Folks have been part of the LGBTQ movement for decades, and so they are fighters, but at the same time, as Mary has pointed out, we don't want to sugarcoat the hard stuff either. I am very happy to say that today the governor signed a bill that we and many other organizations worked on called Disrupting Disparities for LGBT Older Adults. It includes a 3-year LGBTQ Commission on Aging, which is really designed to lift up some of these issues, have subject matter hearings and provide policy recommendations, as well as there is now an LGBTQ liaison in the Illinois Department of Aging, and any entity that contracts with or receives funding from the department also has to have an LGBTQ cultural competency training.
Is this
And that's years of work of listening to LGBTQ older adults and in hearing about the issues that they're facing and looking for solutions. And I think this is going to go a long way towards sort of narrowing those disparities, but they are clearly there.
Well, Tom, maybe piggyback on that a little bit, and I think I left you a little bit too early on your last answer. We have seen where older Americans tend to vote better in elections, yet we do have, like you say, a forced retirement. And we've seen this legislation signed today by the governor, but what can older Americans or Americans in general do to put pressure on lawmakers to eliminate those, mandatory retirement discrimination laws?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, for me, sure, we can talk about changing the laws, but for me it has more to do with the media. It has a lot to do, I call it the 3 M's. It has a lot to do with media, movies, and makeup. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Media is reinforcing, I think, in many of us, what that mindset of an older adult is today. As opposed to us thinking about the mindset of the older adult being this amazingly experienced, incredibly rich and full of all sorts of ideas. No, they've not stopped. They're probably more so today than ever before. And a network of family and friends, of people that we've worked with and have experienced over many years. So it's really, really important. I think, but the way in which media and movies portray older people is not the best. Makeup, I also think we need to change because there's so much emphasis that's placed on us looking quote unquote younger. I don't use makeup, and yet I go, why? We're older adults and we look wonderful. We look absolutely fantastic. So why do we need to change?
Why are you looking at me when you say makeup? Well, I'll give you a little inside baseball. When I'm obviously on WBZ, I don't have to dress up or anything now, but when I'm on TTW, they slap a whole bunch of makeup on me. So if you ever listen to Receive Latino Voices, know that I just got a fresh coat of paint on my face. It's kind of crazy. If I went outside, people think I was, I don't know, dead or something. So, Mary, picking it back on that, we see all these new apps and technology that comes out, seems like every week or every day on there. What is your advice to older Americans? Should they embrace these new technology or just sort of shun it as, oh, that's my grandkids or my kids now?
Oh my goodness, embrace it, of course. And I think we actually know that they are. And these are all these myths, right? That are, some are bound in some fact and truth. But we know that older adults are actually engaging with technology. We saw that during the pandemic when we know that social isolation and loneliness was something that had been certainly a problem beforehand, but many of us felt social isolation and loneliness on a deeper personal level than we had before, and many folks of all ages were turning to technology, whether it was to connect with coworkers by Zoom or with grandchildren on FaceTime. We know, however, that there is rich innovation underway in the age tech space that in many times can leverage technology as a real practical tool to improve the quality of life of older people. That's something that at RRF Foundation for Aging we're increasingly looking at, is how can some of these technology embedded solutions be used in real practical, powerful ways. And we know that when technology has been designed with sort of a user approach in mind, which of course is where all the best solutions come from, is when you think first of who will use them. So in this age tech sphere, it is important to, of course, make sure that the older person is involved in the design and that strong community partners are in place to sort of think about how will it be used and rolled out and all of that. Because of course there might be some differences that we need to pay attention to. But my goodness, technology is here to stay, and thank goodness, because all of the opportunities that it opens up are so exciting. Tom, I don't know if you have anything to say on this subject.
I'll just add one thought, Mary, and that is that I'm a strong proponent of leveraging technology to improve the lives of older adults in such a variety of different ways, and I see so many ways that can happen now. And so all we need to do as older adults is just be open to it. My middle son, I have 3 boys, and my youngest son is a doctor, and the oldest one is a writer. But the middle guy works at Google, and he's actually the senior product director of Google AI. And of course, I'm all the time will say, Dad, I'll say, James. So how do I? Dad, just Google it. So I've gotten used to that now, and I'll do that. And what I have found is that I really am able to use technology in a variety of ways, and it's highly effective, and it works.
I think the big issue we're facing, of course, is access, right? Because there's so many folks who just don't have access to broadband, to the equipment, and they want it. The training, yes, and they want it. We've seen older adults in our storytelling cohorts during the pandemic, or like it's over, during the height of the pandemic, really create community in virtual spaces. So there's a real hunger there for the technology and for creating these new ways of being in community, but the access is huge. It's a huge problem.
Well, I'm going to ask one more question before we get to audience questions. So I want you to start thinking about those questions that this knucklehead reporter is not thinking about. So before we get there, and Tom, I really want to make sure before we go, you give us your TikTok handle. You know, so I'm sure you're on there. All right. Okay, let me ask you this. How can, we hear a lot about LGBTQ, minority groups, Hispanics, certain things you can or can't say, think people might get offended by it, but how do we sort of get younger people to help us out in, they seem to be much more cognizant of not offending people, but when it comes to maybe older adults, maybe they're less sympathetic. How do we get them to our side to be active or to play a role in helping us do this?
Michael, I think the key to that is being able. Oh no, Kim, go.
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Tom, you were on a roll there. It is intergenerational spaces, like everybody has talked about already, and creating a space of both safety and bravery. There is a level of vulnerability required to have these kinds of conversations, but if the space isn't safe to do that, then you're putting, again, a lot of expectations on the person who could be the recipient of harm. So I think being intentional about creating those kinds of spaces and having intergenerational conversations. We have even, again, going back to some of our trainings at Pride Action Tank, we start even with cohorts of older adults with LGBTQ terminology because those terms evolve over time and have meant different things certainly and have felt differently and then landed differently at different points in time. So I think that's necessary, and it's overall, the goal is always to create a culture in whatever environment you're in of safety and openness and the desire to be curious about each other and learn from each other. But Tom, you were going to go somewhere.
Go ahead, answer that question.
I was just going to mention that one of my books is called Lifting People Up, The Power of Recognition. And in it, to answer your question, Michael, what can younger people do? I comment on the need to first listen. And the letters in the word listen are the same letters in the word silent. So in order for us to listen, that means one needs to be silent, first of all. And then the second is empathy. It's not sympathy. There's a huge difference between those two. But empathy means that I care about you. I care about knowing more about you. And therefore, by definition almost, that means I respect you because I'm interested in learning more about you. And then the last one is really to be able to find a way to connect and find some common ground that can go for a long period of time. And I just wanted to mention two of the people that I work with that are here tonight, Luke and Paul, are great examples of people that are at least two generations, I guess, distant from me, and yet they convey all of that, and therefore we have a wonderful relationship. Yeah.
So Mary, how do we leverage, how do we get cooperation or a buy-in from younger Americans to assist older Americans?
Yeah, I think just echoing this, I really do agree that it comes down to finding the common ground. So one of the grantee partners of RRF Foundation for Aging is Northwest Housing Center right here locally in Chicago, and designed a program that was called Common Ground, and it was bringing older people from the community into partnership with younger people from the community, and they were both talking about adverse childhood events, ACEs, which is, those of you in the public health sphere will have heard about, and talk about what you were saying, Kim, of creating safe spaces. This is where the younger people and the older people were really talking about some hardships that they had experienced, some racism that they had experienced. Of course, older people of color have faced a lifetime of injustice and racism, and so that was is an example of one where they intentionally built the common ground space for partnerships to evolve. The older people, of course, had just resiliency abounding that they were able to show to the younger people, which really gave the younger people some hope, some sense of community and longevity that they could look forward to. So that's just one of a myriad of examples, but it means, since we're in this age-segregated society that somehow America has created, that we need to be intentional about creating those spaces, because unfortunately they're not always going to happen organically as much as we would like.
All right. Well, let's get to some of our audience questions, or anybody who has a question. Oh, okay. Well, I'll go down there with you. I'll do what I would just say when we were rehearsing this. I said, well, do my best Phil Donahue impression.
I'm always very curiously surprised. We have many dimensions of diversity. Those of us who are women know that, those of us who are people of color. And we ain't learning from our prior history and how to do better going forward. We start each new diversity issue like it's a brand new challenge. I mean, you know, when women came in the workforce, it's like, well, we gotta train them how to be better. They didn't go and train the men how to work with women. When older people were in the workforce, they told us we needed to learn technology. They didn't go to the young people and say, hey, look, the older people know stuff you don't know that you can learn from. You know, the net is diversity of a team gets better solutions, but they have to learn how to appreciate and work with each other, even though they're probably not thinking the same.
I agree.
I didn't hear a question in there, but I didn't know. Who's next? Okay, I'll go to you, then I'll get to right over here. How about right here?
So I'd love to hear about some language that you would recommend using, because when we talk about reframing, right, and how do people understand and stay away from the negative language, what suggestions would you make for the ways to speak, right, which become models for others to be able to hear, but our generation should be saying them?
I have the simplest answer, first of all. Older and younger people. There are younger people and there's older people. And that's it. Nothing else.
As opposed to, you know, elderly, which is a term that some folks identify with, and that's fine. But you'll notice that, yeah, most of us up here, we're saying older people or older adult. A lot of if we can avoid saying them, that sort of triggers folks to think of us versus them. So instead, at RRF Foundation for Aging, we're working for all of us as we age, sort of that inclusive type of language. If we can avoid saying, as Tom said, silver tsunami, please no. If we can avoid sort of things that might pit us against each other or make us think that someone had, you know, by their own fault ended up in a more difficult situation. Those are some of the broad terms. Kim, you might know some better.
Oh, I agree totally with what you said, but I do want to add that, Tom, I don't mind being referred to as a silver fox. But, you know, I will say, we do internalize this stuff. right? We don't even know that we're saying something negative even about ourselves. A couple of weeks ago now, March 28th, I turned 60. And feel so blessed. I feel like life is just beginning. But I had started referring to myself as old. And I told my wife, I'm like, we're gonna stop doing that. We're not calling ourselves old. We're older, but we're not old. Nobody's old. We're living our lives. And we are blessed to keep doing it. So it really is taking a moment to think about what you're saying. And it's hard to do, because this is ingrained, and you really have to train yourself to not say those things, even about yourself.
I've had to retrain myself in that way, because there were phrases that I would use, and one of them was, "Oh, I'm having a senior moment," which I thought was a cute way of saying, I forgot. No, it's a horrible way. I mean, no, I don't say that anymore. Or the worst one, and I used to do this. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did, but I did. Is you go up to a 70-year-old woman and you say, "Oh, you look great, young lady." No, she's not a young lady. I mean, she's not an old lady either. That's right.
Oh, here we go. Next question.
I want to thank you. I've learned a lot. I thought I knew it all, but it's quite complex. I'm a village member, and I am also facilitating for the last 2 years and exploring anti-racism. And I hear from you that it is equally complex. And it's really worthwhile to talk about it and share. So I'm inspired tonight to offer to the village another group, hopefully intergenerational. That's important, I guess. And the village is a safe space, as you mentioned, so that I don't have to worry about. And let's go for it.
Let's go for it. I love that.
Hello, and thank you for all of your work in this area. I'm Kurt. My mother is 106 years old, and she is with it. But her body obviously has had some problems recently, including a fall. How can we get the medical community to not give up on people once they're past a certain age? She survived the 1918 Spanish flu, and she survived COVID. So my question is, what do we need to do with the medical community to help educate them as well? She goes to a gerontologist in Southern Illinois, but the level of care and kind of writing people off past a certain age happens.
It absolutely does happen. I'm thrilled that she was able to find a geriatrician in Southern Illinois. We know that there are shortages of the medical profession that have been trained and devoted their careers to the older population. So that's one thing, is let's at least start with ensuring that there's appropriate training provided to folks in medical schools. But I think that, of course, doesn't get to the experience that you're saying of what your mom is facing and people wanting to write her off. I think that not to say it again, but the internalized ageism is something that, of course, if the physician that is treating her has sort of come to think, well, she's done pretty well so far, it's a good life, I'm going to direct my attention at the 85-year-old, then that is not giving your mom the quality of care that she needs. So one of the things at RRF Foundation for Aging that we're trying to do is to instill this sort of sense of not anti-aging, anti-ageist work throughout our country through policy and practice changes, but it also comes down to individual professions that are going to need to be eventually trained to reshift their own thinking. And it's the good and bad news is that we have seen with other social justice movements, and I think our work in confronting ageism is a social justice movement. We've talked about the intersectionality between ageism, racism, sexism, homophobia. These things take a long time, but we have also seen that progress can be made. The governor signed a bill today that shows that progress can be made here in Illinois. I would not have thought that that would have happened. And so that gives me hope, but it also, hearing your story of what your mom is experiencing makes me remember that we're going to need to keep at it.
Let me get to this gentleman right here, then still got a few more questions.
So I'm the district's chair, which means I get the opportunity to hear a lot of great speakers. And we had a speaker 2 months ago from an organization called the Asher Life Institute.
Yes.
And he began the conversation by saying, "I'm going to live forever." He says, I say that because we are accustomed to saying that we'll live for a certain time. And we have a mindset about that Tom pointed out really good, that we just say to ourselves too much that says we've only got so much time left. And I had the great opportunity 2 weeks ago to interview a woman that's going to be 108 in July. And it's wonderful to feel young again. I'm 78, and to have her tell me, "Oh, my kids are your age." It was wonderful. But I think just a headset and just the mindset that says, we're old, and we've got to get beyond that. And we're at the starting point for making this change. We can't expect the rest of the world to change for us.
Great.
I'm gonna go right over here, and then we'll go down there.
So I work in higher education, and my university colleagues in Chicago talk about the demographic cliff that's going to occur in 2026 when the number of 18-year-olds showing up that want to go to college is going to drop dramatically, and it reflected by the demographic shift across the country. At the same time, this whole activity that we're involved with the Village Chicago and Aging Innovators is directing us towards this reality that older adults are extraordinarily capable, way beyond the capabilities of their parents, their collective parents, and it's still hard for people to understand that we are going to be really good into our 90s, many of us. And so I think it's something that this whole exercise that we're doing here, maybe, I hope, riding the horse in the direction that it's going, that the companies are going to have to understand, employers in general, have to understand they've got to reinvest in older adults. And so I'd like your comment on that, because it's definitely a mindset shift, because they just think all I have to do is, I'll just bring in the younger set and we'll throw the old people out and bring in the new people and train them with the new stuff.
A lot of questions. So we got time for maybe just a couple more, and then.
Let's take the spot as guest.
I was wondering, we spend a lot of time, my mother's also older, and they're in a senior community. So that means they're deliberately isolated from younger people. The social situation is not set up for interaction. Is there something actually being done about that, or is that an issue we have to push? That is why we can't be building buildings that are multi-generational, as opposed to continuing the segregated concept that we currently have.
Absolutely. And to answer that question, it is something we have to push, yes. I think it's happening in some places, and that's wonderful. When we look abroad at some of our more of a global mindset, we see that is happening more frequently and more naturally than it is here in the US, but there are some great pockets of hope again, where some innovative programs are starting to take hold. Co-located housing is one of the fancy terms. We have a grantee partner here in Illinois that is bringing LGBTQ older people and LGBTQ younger people together. One Roof Chicago is doing some great work. So again, one of the challenges though, of course, is all right, so that's happening. How can we scale that? How can we make that not such an anomaly? It's gonna take a lot of work, but I think that starting to at least crack into, that doesn't really make sense. Would we really want just all of the ages separate? That doesn't feel natural. Let's lean into that instinct and say it when, just as you have.
I think we have one more question. Does somebody have another question? Okay.
I rarely made it back from the office to see the evening news, but one night long ago, I made it in time to hear Peter Jennings, and he had a report where he showed people, and he said, what do these people have in common? They were short, they were tall, they were heavy, they were skinny, they were dancing, they were teaching, they were learning. He said, what did they have in common? I couldn't catch on, and I'm very observant. Then he went through this whole rigmarole, and I didn't catch on. He said, they're all senior citizens. And I was alone in my apartment. I just gasped. And then they interviewed them, and they said these people felt far better than their parents ever did. But attitude makes a big difference. There was a special on one of the evening programs. It was an hour long on one of the major networks quite some time ago. And they studied centenarians, the fastest growing population. I wrote it down and I'm trying to remember. They had 4 things in common: attitude, the ability to transcend loss. They had buried spouses, children, friends, etc. A sense of purpose. One woman was 104 in New York, and she was teaching aerobics for the older crowd. And they weren't exactly jumping up and down, but when they would go meet, they'd say, I've got a 2-for-1 for lunch, let's do this. The other one said, there's a senior special on such and such. And what you really need is camaraderie. Living at home and aging in place is good for some people, for others it's very isolating. And what was the last one? Curiosity, always learning. I had a client, she was, at the time she was about 95, and she'd see someone eating something, and she'd say to the waiter or waitress, what are they eating over there? Just give me a little plate. Just give me a little plate. And then they give her practically a whole portion. And one more thing, talking about someone older. My father was my parents had a May-December marriage. On July 22nd, 1934, my father was having coffee across the street, and he heard the shots ring out in the alley of the Biograph when they killed Dillinger. So my father was here.
You must have brought that up because I'm from Indiana. There's always an Indiana connection. There's Indiana. I won't take offense to that.
Okay, I swear that this is not rehearsed and I'm not a plant for this question. I genuinely want to know the answer. For people in the audience who want to stand up for in an anti-ageist way and to do something active in their lives to address ageism when they encounter it, what would each of you recommend?
Serena, I recommend one thing that Oscar Wilde once said, and the quote is, "Be yourself, everybody else has already been taken."
I'd say speak up, just as we are in this moment in our country. I think about the shootings that happen. I think about Buffalo, and that I think our country is really going through a time of awakening, reckoning. So many other words, but the optimist in me, and that's who I am. That's who my mom raised me to be. likes to look for opportunities, and I think that this term of being an upstander is one that I have been drawn toward, and I think we are all called in this day and age, even more than before, to stand up for injustice when we see it, in big ways and in small. And so, of course, one would need to adjust the manner in which one's upstanding if it's a smaller moment of, because it might be just an unintended comment of, oh, I'm sorry about my senior moment. I think that all of us in that room, we can, maybe say if a friend or a colleague says that, oh, really? I think that's great that you're aging. I think that, so I think I would hope that all of us can stand up in the big ways, certainly when we see injustice around discrimination against age and the automatic retirement ages. Those are moments for big upstanding moments. But there are also ones that I think we all encounter every day that where we can be upstanders in our own lives as well. So I would just encourage us to lean into that, even though it might feel a little uncomfortable. The more and more we do it, I think the more we will get more comfortable with it, and that's how change is going to happen.
Wow, it's hard to add to that. I totally agree with both of you, and I think, there are certainly movement moments, public policy moments that we can all work on. But I think it really is making those one-to-one connections, getting to know somebody who's different from you. That's the kind of thing that really changes the environment, changes the world. The policy stuff has to happen. It is a long-term fight, as you all know. But we can change our environment just by connecting with somebody else, and I think it's important for us to realize that we have that kind of power to change our environment just by connecting with someone else.
Well, I think we all will agree this was a lively discussion, so can we give a round of applause? To Luke and Darcy.
Go ahead.
I just want to thank everyone for coming. This is really exciting and interesting tonight. Just want to make a comment about aging in place. The Village of Chicago doesn't use that term anymore. And part of the reason is because it kind of depicts this dying in place, and that it's very static, and that it's not an exciting, wonderful, vibrant life. And we like to think of it instead as living in community or thriving in community. So you'll hear a lot of changes along those lines. The Village movement has started aging in place, but we believe that it has fed into this whole concept of ageism, and it's actually hurt, in terms of embracing everyone in the community and identifying people to discover what their unique strengths are, what's positive about them. And I guess, Serena, just in response to your comment, if we can try really hard to find something positive about each person we meet, that's a really great step in the direction of saying, okay, we can begin to accept people regardless of what they look like or how old they are, what disabilities they may or may not have, etc. But that there's something unique and wonderful and exciting about every person. And if we focus on those strengths and if we harness those strengths, I think that we're all going to be a much more inclusive society. Anyway, thank you for coming.
And very well said, Darcy. And thank you, Darcy, and the Village of Chicago and RRF Foundation for Aging for all of your support, all the speakers up here, and also thank you to the audience. And one thing I want to share is, as I was listening, as one of the, we'll say, younger adults in the room, I was reflecting on how lucky I felt being exposed to all this kind of thinking. And I think that's what we're trying to do with Turn the Page on Age. And we need to expose more people, and all of you can now be Turn the Page on Age ambassadors. So as Darcy was saying and others were saying, help spread the word, because this is about changing minds and it is about changing attitudes. And you're going to need to change some hearts and change some behaviors and ways of thinking, but all of us can do that together. which is also why we are recording this. So internet people, we need your help too. There's a lot of you out there, and this is going to take a lot of us coming together. So in closing, thank you all for being a part of this kickoff initiative, and we hope to see you again real soon.